You can let. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this afternoon's webinar. Thank you for joining us. Everybody's coming in. This is absolutely fabulous. We will be starting in just a moment. Once we can get everybody into the room that's waiting, we will begin this fabulous webinar. Great. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Linda H. Scruggs. I am the co-executive director here at Ribbon. We are really excited to have you here this month as we're hosting our Rock for Aging, Embracing the Promise monthly webinar. As many of you know, this is March. So March means that is Women in History Month. So this month, we're going to have women history makers in HIV. And I'm going to be joined by 4 lovely young ladies, and we'll talk about them in just a moment. I do want to just give homage to all the women history makers in the HIV community or not in the HIV community. Each month since 1887, we've been setting each March since 1887, we've been setting aside this month to acknowledge the accomplishments and the advancements that women have been putting together across society in all efforts, in large and small efforts. So we're really excited to be hosting this month. Guys, you are invited to be with us this month, and we haven't forgotten you. June is Men's Health Month, and we'll be talking to all guys. So if we can get started, we will. I'm going to just ask everybody to do a quick roll call. If you're willing, would you please go into the chat box? Tell us who you are, where you're from. If you like, you're welcome to do your pronouns. My pronouns is she and hers. But please take a second, tell us where you're coming from as I begin to introduce our panelists, our guest speakers for today. This is going to be a little different from our regular webinars. We're really just going to be having a discussion about what is it like. They don't want me to call them history makers. What is the life of a woman living with HIV who happens to also be a history maker? And I'll talk about that simply because the 4 guests that we have today are history makers, not just because they labeled themselves. All of these women are connected to other women and making a difference in the lives of hundreds and thousands of women across the U.S. living with HIV. Some of them may be known by you, some of them may not be known. Both History Month is for celebrating those who changed the world, but you know what? Sometimes somebody's just changed one person's life. So as we go throughout the day, I invite you to introduce yourself in the chat, but I also invite you to say someone's name. Who's that person that has been who's she that has been a history maker in your life? I love saying the first person who really made a difference in my life in HIV, I say her name often. She's no longer with us. Her name is Fern Johnson. She was the woman that told me to stop being a wimp and bold up, do something, and that I had something to offer the community. And I just had to be willing to use it. So I give honor to Fern, the memory of Fern Johnson today. I give honor to my dear friend Gigi Nix today. I give honor to all of the women who stand up, whether they're out loud with their conversation or they're writing emails, they're advocating, they're taking care of their families, whatever they might be doing. But more than anything, I give honor to the woman living with HIV who made a decision to take care of herself. So thank you. I see some folks are in the chat. I'm going to ask Heather, our tech person, to take this slide down and let's bring up our ladies. I want to bring on board Kathy Elliott. Come on, Kathy Elliott from Nevada is with us. Bert Queen from Baltimore, Maryland is with us. Miss Earlene Budd from Washington, D.C. and Yolanda Diaz from New York. Yeah. So we have a great panel this afternoon. These are, I tell all of them, they're my sheroes. I love them all. I'm really happy to be in a place where we can have a conversation together. So today we're just going to be having just a conversation on the resilience of womanhood and living with HIV. the resilience of talking about family, talking about taking care of ourselves, how we're helping ourselves, but also how we're helping and working in the community. I'm going to start with asking the ladies to do self-introductions. So I'm going to call on you guys the way I see you on my screen. Come on, Kathy, then Bert, Earlene, and then Yolanda.
So good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Linda, for inviting me. Linda and I have kind of known each other in and out of the activist world for quite some time. So I live in Las Vegas. I'm originally from Los Angeles. I have been living with HIV since 1995. And there's, been a lot of ups and downs through that. And I'm happy to share a little bit more of my story and kind of where I'm at now. But the topic of resilience, I think, is incredibly important, because we often underestimate that about ourselves. We can see it in other people, we don't necessarily see that in ourselves. So I'm hoping to impart some of that wisdom today.
Great, thank you, Kathy. Come on, Bert. Yeah, we hear you.
My name is Bert Queen. I live in Baltimore, Maryland. I call myself a recovering human being today. I'm recovering from drugs and alcohol. I'm recovering from HIV. I've been living with being positive for 37 years. And it's been, I used to think it was a curse, but today I know it's a blessing to have known that I was HIV positive.
Wow.
Community with women. I'm a hands-on person. So I'm one of the ones that go and knock on the door and say, how can I help you? Let's go to a meeting. Let's go to treatment. Let's make an appointment for a doctor appointment. Let's go get tested. And I'm truly grateful for the opportunity to come share my experiences. And thank you, Linda, and everybody else that's responsible for making this happen.
Great. Thank you, Bert. Thank you, Bert. Miss Earlene, come on, talk to us.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you so very much for inviting me to be a part of this phenomenal panel. And when I think back, I often say that it was a group of gay men that saved my life. The Inner City AIDS Network back in the early 80s on a back street of 5th and K Northwest, where they came and offered me the ability to become a peer advocate. And I have just, excelled. I've had my ups and downs. I was diagnosed in 1989, believe it or not, while incarcerated. But because I had been a peer advocate before, I was well accepting of my status. And one of my things that I often say when I'm speaking is that life is what you make it, living with HIV or anything else. And that's how I see it. And I can tell you that I'm just like, every day I'm pleased, I'm happy, but I often say, when I look back over my life, I can truly say that I've been blessed. So thank you. And I'm just so humbled to be a part of this panel today. And yes, I'm a transgender woman of color, age 64, believe it or not. Thank you.
Come on, 64 don't look like you used to. All right, now, come on, Yolanda, introduce yourself for us.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. I want to welcome everyone to this terrific panel that we're going to have. My name is Yolanda Diaz. I come from the Bronx. I actually work in Iris House. I have to say that up front. One of my mentors, I always say, was Petra Berrios. She was the one who mentored me, and actually Chikatelli's associates, to talk about myself, a woman living with HIV. I was diagnosed also in 1989, like 35 years living with HIV. And I love this topic, resilience, because I do it every morning. When I get up, I just push, and keep on going and end up at the day with a smile in my face. As long as I gave the message to one woman, I'm good with that. Thank you for allowing me to share, and thank you for inviting me.
Wow, thank you. Thank you. I'm so honored. And again, just I know a few people come in. We welcome you to the webinar today from the Rock for Aging Positively Group Organizing Center here at Ribbon. Let me give a moment for our sponsors. We're always grateful for our support from Gilead Sciences, who has our funder of the HIV/AIDS Positively Initiative. This is our monthly webinar. Ladies, I kind of told everybody we're going to kind of act like we're in my living room. I have 4 great friends hanging out in the living room. We're just going to kind of talk a little bit. This month, we're not going to talk a lot about data, a lot of the normal. We're just really going to talk about, you keep hearing the word resilience, steadfastness, power, strength, challenges. This has not been all easy. Being a woman living with HIV, aging with HIV. I know I was diagnosed in 1990. I was 25 years old and pregnant, right? You can believe I am so excited. And we said often, many of us did not think that we would get to the place where we're over 50, right? Many of us did not even imagine that space. I'm going to ask you to tell me a little bit about what got you to the place, or were you ever the place where you didn't think you was going to make it? What were some of the tools that you were able to use to kind of grab on and hold on to as you made your decision, as you started this journey in HIV?
Well, my name is Bert. When I found out in 1986 that I was positive, I was in a psych unit because I was using. And in the psych unit, when I got my diagnosis, I thought that I was gonna die. They told me that I might have 5 years to live. And it was like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna die in 5 years. I thought that would keep me from using because of my diagnosis. And what I found out was that I had to get rid of my drug addiction first. I had to surrender to the drugs and admit that I was an addict. And there was no way that I couldn't stay clean if I didn't, because I tried to stay clean because I was HIV positive. And what happened was I just winded up in detox after detox after detox. It wasn't until I arrested my addiction that I was able to stay clean. I had to trust in the God of my understanding. I had to surrender and know that I could not do it by myself. I had to let people help me. And the first person that I reached out to was this lady named Joyce Kramer. She ran a place called Heroes. I had went to sign. A friend of mine had left a message to me and another friend. She had died from AIDS, and at the time we didn't know anything about what AIDS, but she said for us to get tested. So when I found out that I wanted to go to the first quilt that was in Baltimore, and I went to put her name on that quilt, and I met Joyce Kramer, and that was like the first sign of me even getting better in anything, because I found out I couldn't even find who I was till I dealt with my drug addiction phase first. And then I had to, trust and believing that if I didn't surrender to God, the God of my understanding, that I couldn't get no help. So I started going to a 12-step program, and I started practicing the principles that my mother had embedded in me that I had lost through my addiction, like faith and hope and patience and guidance, and I could go on and on and on, but I know there's a lot of ladies on here. But it was through that experience of finding out that I was HIV positive in that psych ward, thinking that they wasn't telling me the whole truth anyway, because they thought I was crazy. Because, at that point, I had realized it was insane to be putting a needle in my arm. That was a long process within itself. But that woke me up to a lot of things, and being being able to stay clean. And then, my mother passed on and I was able to take care of her. It was like she was my baby and I was her adult. And
Wow.
I give all my thanks to my mother, because it's like now, even me sitting in here talking to y'all, it's like I'm experiencing all the things that my mother told me years ago. Now I'm practicing to my nieces and my nephews and my sister and my family. And it's like I just seem to become her.
Wow. Bert, you already unpacking this thing. I had just put in the chat box, we're going to have real talk today. And Bert starts all right in the beginning. She's like, I was on the psych ward, right? And I heard you talking about family, making choices. And there's some of us
Okay, friend, I got it.
come through this place where recovery has been a choice to be in.
All right, now.
Again, I want to ask you, please, to mute yourself if you're not on the panel. Make sure folks stay muted. Other ladies, talk to me. Where did it start? What was the beginning of this journey?
Sure, I'll go. So first of all, I kind of have to echo Bert, just with, while Bert was in the psych ward, I was on the stroll. So yeah, I have a history of addiction as well. And it was a brief period of clean time, not working any program, that I elected to go. I'd been out on the streets for like 10 years, smoking crack and all that. This was all, my life in my 20s. And I elected to go get a physical because I hadn't had one in years and years and years, except the, rudimentary checks they give you when you go to jail for various offenses associated with that lifestyle. And I remember getting my blood drawn. It was late March 1995, and they gave me an appointment to come back 2 weeks later for my test results. And I was like, okay, whatever. And I wasn't really worried because I had tested negative a few times before that, but I was definitely living, very high risk lifestyle, lots of partners and stuff like that. And I got a phone call the following Monday. So this was like Thursday and Monday morning. And they wouldn't tell me why, but they just said, can you please come back to the clinic? And I was like, why? And they're like, just please come down. And so, I immediately knew, like, the red flags were waving. And I went into this woman's office, and it was clear that she didn't have a lot of experience delivering positive test results. Because, the moment she told me, of course, I knew what HIV was, and I had known, people that were in my social circle that were sick or had passed away. And so, when she told me that, I immediately thought, I'm going to die. I'm never going to have kids, and nobody's going to want me. Right. So I immediately just started bawling. And I think that made her nervous, because she pointed to a picture on her desk. She's like, well, this is my brother, and I do this work because he passed away from AIDS. And of course I went, wow, even more. So that was my experience getting diagnosed. And I didn't deal with that very well, because I immediately went out and got high and stayed high for about a year, until the Department of Corrections relieved me of my addiction for another year. But for that first year, I just thought, I'm going to die, and what the heck, right? So, I was out there ripping and running. And it was actually when I was a guest of the California Department of Corrections. I connected with a few other women. It was very on the down low, that there was sort of an HIV support group in that facility. And they had these newsletters, and one of them was from an organization called Women Alive in Los Angeles. And it was the first I was reading that, wow, there were maybe some new medications coming down the pike. And because the organization was very much focused on treatment advocacy for women. And when you talked about calling out people in our lives, so I wrote to them, and the founder of the organization, Mary Lucy, and her partner, Nancy McNeil, who was the executive director, wrote me back and said, come to the organization when you get out and we'll help you. And so I did. And eventually I started volunteering, then I got a job, and then I just threw myself into HIV work. And that, just became like, okay, I didn't really have a career before that, but now I did. And as you mentioned, it's not necessarily, been a bad thing. It's been great. And I would have never met some of the amazing people that I have had this not become part of my life. So that was my experience in that early, like, I thought I was going to die. And then luckily I didn't have to live that long with it, thinking I was going to die before newer medications came out. And so I, got on that bandwagon, and lo and behold, here I am, and here we all are. So that's me.
Thank
Yes.
you, Kathy. That's wow. Yolanda and Earlene, I'm gonna switch up a little bit on you. I would love for you, Earlene. I know, because I met Earlene early on as an advocate. So Earlene, if you can think kind of beyond that first moment, what made you be willing to be a voice? How did this community activism start for you? If I could ask you that question.
Thank you, Linda, for that question. And let me just say that in the 80s, I had witnessed and saw that a lot of my friends were starting to die, to become infected with HIV. And I came up in a circle where there was like everybody shared everybody. So we all had the same men and all of that. So for me, I was usually like I think I'm like one of the last ones in that 80s circle that got diagnosed. I always embraced and said to myself, it's going to come my way eventually. And so having been trained through ICANN, the Inner City AIDS Network, I had prepared myself, unlike others, to be acceptance of when it came, and I look forward to it. And it just happened to come while I was incarcerated in 89 at the DC Department of Corrections, when a doctor came to me and said to me, Miss Bud, I have not so good news, but your blood work came back positive. And I looked at him and I said, okay, so what's next? So then he said, well, AZT. I say, what is that? AZT. But see, I remember that AZT was making people sick. So much going on. So after I got out of jail, I really went to the HIV Community Coalition, started volunteering, doing a lot of work. But the thing that got me really going was the fact that I knew that I was a survivor. Because I survived, it made me who I am today. And let me be clear, when I talk about that group of gay guys, I don't say that to be sarcastic. I say that because normally you hear within the LGBT community that transgender and gay men don't get along. But it was a group of gay men, and some of them, including people like Dr. Ron Simmons, they saved my life. So I'm just ever so appreciative of that. But it has pushed my advocacy. Let me just say, I have never fathomed that my life and sitting here with all these plaques and all this, which mean absolutely nothing to me, because I absolutely live for my day. I'm a true Christian of God, and I believe that I'll be able to stand before him. And I just want him to say, farewell, my faithful servant, that work has been done. That's really what I'm looking for. That's that great day. And that's my advocacy. And that's why I do. People say, well, you go out of your way. You act like you Mother Teresa. I say, that's not what I intend to do. I give because it's the right thing to do.
Right.
So that's kind of just a little bit of I have to catch myself, when I start to talk about all the goodness and all the things that go on. And let me be clear, no, I'm not in recovery. I am an addict. I went through that. But at the end of the day, I was one of those people that could control, stop using, don't use, and go through that. And so, I can on a casual day have a drink of wine. It won't bother me or take me back. But don't get me wrong. I've smoked crack, PCP, did acid. I've done all of that. But everybody's story is not the same. So I just applaud all of you all that are in recovery. And I say, hold on to it.
Oh, thank you, without a doubt. Thank you, Earlene. This is so exciting. You guys, Yolanda, I'm not gonna say nothing. Go ahead, Yolanda. What you got to say?
So I just want to piggyback on a lot of what we are talking about, because I have been diagnosed in 1989, and my story is that I was in prison. I used a lot of drugs and I sold a lot of drugs. So I got arrested for selling, and in prison, I already knew because I'm in New York, so in Rikers Island they test you, and I already knew that I was positive. I knew before I got to this prison state, because prison was a revolving door for me. It was just like living inside, outside. So when I came home, this state bid, I did a state bid in Bedford Hills. When I was in Bedford Hills and I came down from Avion, I got with some fantastic people in prison. I met Sam Rivera, that most of a lot of people know him when he was working in Arrive, but he also used to work at the Women's Prisons Association. And I got with the groups in prison, and I said, you know what, I'm gonna come out this shelf. I already knew I was living with HIV for 7 years, and I
Right.
was sick and tired of being sick and tired. I don't know if anybody knows about being sick and tired of being sick and tired. So I got with the Women's Prison Association, and I insisted on a training for pre and post testing with inmates and COs. So we had that training in prison, and Sam Rivera had brung it there. And when I came down, when I came down from prison, I went straight to Arrive Exponents. In prison, this man used to come in. He was from Narcotics Anonymous. He used to do his NA meetings, and he used to say, well, half of you ain't gonna make it, the other half ain't gonna make it. And I just said, you know what, I don't know what he's talking about, but I know that I'm just sick and tired of going to jail. And this is going to be my last state bid. And I made my last state bid. And when I came home, I went to Arrive Exponents. I didn't sit in the back. This lady, I think was her Gina and Denise Drayton, and they were all there. And I was like, you know what? I want to be like these ladies. And I sat in the front. I took the cotton out of my mouth, my ears, put it in my mouth. I stopped talking because I talk a lot. So if anybody knows me, you ladies know that I talk a lot. So I sat in the front and I started asking questions about medication. What does a woman do, living with HIV? And how can I get better? And how can I get a job? Because I don't want to go back to jail. So they gave me a lot of suggestions about trainings. And I started, going into these little groups like NDRI, Chickatelli's Associates. I started doing, a lot of groups that are downtown, body positive. I started entering a lot of groups, and I finally got a job at La Casita Esperanza down in the Bronx. And when that finished, but when I got that first job, I tell you, I had a lot of mentoring because I used to scream a lot to people. So I had to learn how to tone down my voice, talk low, don't talk like if I know everything. So, and I started pushing, like to do, get myself better and get out of the streets, because my thing was the drugs. If I stay isolated in the streets, I know I'm going to pick up and use drugs. And I do the best I can not to go back to prison. And that's how I succeeded. My story is that I succeeded in community-based organizations. I started working with Smart University with Susan Rodriguez. It was like so grassroots. I said, you know what? I met Petra Barrios there. I met Susan Rodriguez. And we was like Susan used to say, we're like gypsies going all over. And we used to go all over, like to do now I know it was like interventions, but it was like these 2-hour groups. They got funded from the Ms. Foundation. I met so many good women from Ms. Foundation. And that's how I started, my grassroots, my foundation is a foundation. You have to get with the foundation, And I met all these great women, and I said, you know what? I'm going to stick with them like white on rice. And I hold on to these women, and every day I would call them or they would call me. And if I needed something at 8:00 in the morning, I would call somebody.
I love it.
I just want to say that thank you so much, because that's like my resilience, like staying in touch.
You guys have said a lot, and these webinars are never long enough. I want to ask you a couple more questions. Thank you, everybody. I see folks are commenting in the chat. Thank you. Please make sure you post any questions you may have for the panel. But I want us to get focused for a little bit. I'm gonna ask you a couple of direct questions. And I know, Yolanda, all of y'all have hit some gems, but Kathy, one of the things Yolanda talked about was health, right? And I know you spent a lot of time over the last decade looking at women and looking at health and HIV as a whole. There's a debate in the aging community of HIV, because there's all of us are what we identify as long-term survivors. All of us remember when treatment wasn't as it is today, right? And then there are folks who've been diagnosed most recently who are also over 50. They don't remember that space, right? They may not have known that space. I would think, Kathy, if you could think, is there something about health as we're living and aging? What might you say, what's important about you and caring for your health now that you have survived, now that you are here, now that you're continuing in this thriving space? Give me just a little bit, what might be a good focus around health for you?
Well, first of all, I remember in the early days, again, when I first got involved, it was the mid 90s. And again, that legacy, from Mary Lucy and Nancy McNeil that sort of passed down to me was this necessity to advocate for women, because there was a time when women were excluded from clinical trials for HIV meds because of our ability to get pregnant and various other reasons. And, unfortunately, still today, there's an enduring lack of women and people of color in many of the clinical trials. It's getting better, and there have been some advances, but that is still an issue. And, particularly as, newer meds, long-acting meds, it's wonderful, right? The evolution of treatment over the years, but we still need to understand how these medications affect us sort of over our lifespan. And, it's rare that anybody stays on the same HIV medication indefinitely. And usually what ends up happening, especially when you hit, 50, you got to have cholesterol lowering medications and high blood pressure and what else. So I think in terms of health, where women, the things that we need to be paying attention to is to, sort of research and understand, what the different options, treatment options that are available, right? And so that we can have an effective dialogue with our provider about what medications we want to be on in terms of treating our HIV. But the other part of that is, and it tends to, HIV has been the focus of our health, for years, especially those of us who've, been living with it since for 20 or 30 years. And we tend to forget about other stuff like mammograms and pap smears and, testing for anal cancer as well. I mean, a lot of women think, well, I don't need to worry about that. And no, I mean, it's all of those things. And it's sort of the care over the lifespan, but also women-centric care that we still need to be an advocate for ourselves in our doctor's office. And I have a really great doctor in Los Angeles. I still fly out to see her, even though I live in Las Vegas. But I had to remind her on a recent visit, like, isn't it time for my next mammo or, colonoscopy and things like that? Because as women, often our entree into sort of medical care was, through our diagnosis. And when we're younger, they tend to, pay a lot of attention to our vaginal area, right? But again, we're aging with HIV and all of the same health conditions that impact the general population. It can impact us and a lot of us, because of our previous, histories of smoking and substance use and not eating right. And even, medications, we have to, be vigilant about monitoring our health. So that would be my soapbox today about health. Now, the mental health part of it is a whole nother story.
I love that. Thank you. And I'm a piggyback. I was just reading an article around smoking in women and HIV. And, I know there's some smokers on this line, right? You can beat me up if you want, but research is telling us, guys, more of us are dying due to lung disease related to smoking. It's not HIV that's getting us. It's some of those other things that we're doing. And I remember when my midwife, I used to be a smoker. I was a smoker for many years. And when I was pregnant, I stopped smoking. And literally the afternoon my baby was born, I went downstairs and bummed a Newport, right? Because I stopped smoking because I was pregnant. And I'll never remember my midwife said at my 6-week appointment, she said, why you're not willing to die of HIV, but you're willing to die of lung disease? I was like, oh, crap. Crap. Like, that don't make sense to me. And I'm not saying that to shame nobody, but we have to look at our whole life, right? Our health. I'm going to ask Yolanda real quick, Yolanda, how does HIV and being a parent, being a mom, a woman, how has this disease impact that space? I'm gonna keep bouncing. I'm gonna go to Bert. I'm gonna ask Bert, when you're talking about communities, when we're Bert is, she said she's a hands-on person, right? So how is that when we're talking about recovery and faith? You started talking about faith, going back to your mom, and I'm gonna come back. But Yolanda, real quick, give me some jewels of us surviving and resilience and family. And again, I open it up to define family, not necessarily just who you birth, define family.
So my family is not only my daughter, it's my grandson, it's my brothers, my sisters, also, I have family with my nieces, my nephews. I am so blessed. I would say I'm so blessed because I never thought I was going to live 35 years living with HIV. And when my grandson was born, he's 9 years old. He has liver disease, he has bowel disease. And I thought that I wasn't gonna, I always told my husband, my George, I always told George, well, we probably ain't gonna see him, when he be 9 or 10 years old, but the devil's a liar. Because my grandson, I went on vacation with him. I spare, we have good moments. He lives in Connecticut, so I go over there, he comes over here, and he knows his grandma. My daughter, because I was using drugs and I was in jail, I have 3 children, and I only have relationships with one. So one of my sons, he got adopted in the system. My other daughter, she's angry still, so I leave her in her space with the anger. And my youngest daughter, me and her connect, and we go out, we have dinners, we socialize, we talk about a lot of things, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I told her I used to use drugs, but family is something that I appreciate living with HIV. I talk with my brothers. None of my brothers call me. I'm the only one who calls them. And I say that to this day. I'm always calling you guys. You guys never call me. I'm always the one the mama, and calling them and seeing how you are and how you doing, and let's get together and reaching out, because I think that's so important, to have family. We're living with HIV. My mother passed away. My sister, she also passed away from cancer. And also my niece from asthma and stuff like that. So my family right now, the family that I have, I cherish them. I walk with them. I pray for them. They pray for me. And we are not super tight, but we're just doing the family thing. Sometimes I say, let's do the family thing and let's have quality time with each other, because tomorrow's not promised to everybody, I wanted to say about health. We have one of my friends just recently got diagnosed with bone indensity, osteoporosis, and women, we go through, I'm just going to my doctor to check if I have osteoporosis myself, how is my bones?
Yeah, one of our good friends that's online, Jules, taught me a lot about bone density, and I had my first bone density test back in September. Definitely as a woman, even more so, while they talk about calcium and everything that we need to do. And if you're a woman over 50, you definitely need to be talking to your providers around bone density and some of the what seems to be very basic, but for whatever reasons, we have to learn. I think it was Amanda in the chat to talk about research, and particular research in a trans population, but among women, period, right? There's not enough research done, and often we miss the mark when it comes to really knowing about women and what women are doing. Bert, I'm going to ask you to come on and, talk to us a little bit about faith. I know where you stand in faith, and how is faith grounding you in this time of aging and HIV as a whole? How is that showing up for you?
That's a good question. Well, what happened with me, and I always have to come back to my drug addiction, being able to survive that was really more important than living with the HIV. And I believe from being an addict, overdosing, God keep rescuing me, being able to go in so many detox centers and come out, and and even with the living with the HIV, I've been positive for 37 years, and absolutely nothing ever went on with that other than my diagnosis. And I believe that's because I had faith, and because when I started my change, and I went to God and I asked him to help me, and I made a commitment to go to my doctors. I had to have my doctor for HIV. I had to have my regular doctor. My biggest thing now is, just like you say, getting old in recovery is this Mr. Arthritis and the density thing. I just got tested for that. And it's like all the things that come with aging is hitting on me.
Mm-hmm. Yes. We lost your volume, Bert. We lost your volume. We lost your volume, Bert. She is talking and we can't hear her. Heather, click Bert and let her know we'll come back to her for a second. So let me go to Miss Bud.
Yes.
Talk to me a little bit. What's going on in the community? And I want to go back to you for a second, even to talk about family in the sense of chosen family. I know and know for myself, my own life experience, how important chosen family is as well. So come talk to us for a minute.
And thank you for that question. I was sitting here pondering on how I was going to respond, but it quickly hit me in my head that being a transgender woman of color, coming out of a faith-based family, being raised and estranged from my family, believe it or not, since I was 14. So I was on my own pretty much since 14. Incarceration, the juvenile and all that stuff went on. But the point is, my mother, father, several sisters and aunts and uncles on both sides of my family all have deceased. And I have, believe it or not, I became an activist and also in doing funerals and burials. And so I became acclimated and expecting that this way of life was to come in terms of death, the thing called death. And I actually have now one sister, one brother, and a niece. That's literally who I have left in terms of family, and maybe a cousin here or there. But my family is now the LBGT community. That's who I draw to, that who comes, they call me Mama Bud in the community and all of that. And so I have learned and accepted that family can be whomever, because I think of oftentimes when that debate is out there about what is a mother, and is a mother because she's called mother? Absolutely not. I have kids that I've reared for I think 14 years that I've mentored, and they call me Mother Bud. Yes, I'm not born biologically a female, but I think it's what comes from your heart and what the ability that you have to impress upon people and do that. And let me just answer the question that Amanda had. You are 100% correct. There is not enough research or information that's out there on transgender women of color. And guess what? At the end of the day, the government, the the Republicans for sure are not trying to learn no more, and they don't want any more. But it's panels like this that elevate us and let people know that we're not just sex workers. We're not individuals that just walk the street. We're people that are human beings. We hold jobs. We do things. So again, that is just my story. That's just my story. And thank you again. I'm just so excited and elated about being a part of this panel.
I love it. I love it. Thank you. And I love it. Someone in the chat, okay, I lost who it was, that noted, they came because they saw that this was going to be women talking. It's not often that you get a panel of women I'm seeing. And we're just having conversations about what has it been like and what are our motivators. I love talking about family. When people hear me talk about my family all the time. The family that I talk about as a biological family is not the same family I had when I was diagnosed with HIV. I was also very separated from my family. And it literally was the HIV community that taught me how to love my family for who they were, but for not who I wanted them to be. And it was the HIV community who gave me the strength to be okay with who I am and not have to fit in these spaces. I love that. Like Earlene was saying, I've had mothers and aunts and uncles and brothers in the HIV community. The young people be wanting to call me grandma now. Like folks used to call me auntie and Linda and mom. And the young people like grandma. I'm like, grandma. Like I got a problem with that. But it's an honor because that means what? We are aging. We are elderly women. And to be called someone's mother, we know what that's supposed to be a sister. Like many of you have said, HIV has not been the worst thing that's happened to me. And some people in the world will find that hard to believe. But as a woman who have been survived rape, incest, low literacy, I graduated high school with a 1.3 point average. Like I really shouldn't even have graduated, right? And HIV was what taught me I wasn't a dumb woman. It was what taught me a lot of things. And I love that telling people I graduated college with honors as a woman living with HIV. 30 years after high school, it was this community that gave me strength to know that it was just different. We're going to open up the lines. I put a message out there. If folks have a question, we only got a few more minutes. We got about 5 minutes. If you have a question, you're welcome to raise your hand. I'm going to ask you to be short. I wish we had more time that we could talk because this has been fabulous. Community is important. I want you, again, just all of you as history makers. Heather, do we have any hands up? I can't see folks.
Yes, we have a question from Denise, and so I'm going to ask her to come off mute and ask her question.
Hi, everybody. This is an excellent workshop. I appreciate everybody sharing. I am also a recovering person. I've been positive for 30 years and 32 years clean. And this is really good, straight talk. I appreciate it. I just wanted to say I was also a smoker. I had to join a contest because just saving my life wasn't good enough. I had to join a contest. I thought I was going to win $500 from Ken Spiderweb, the DJ. So I went and I got acupuncture and I stopped smoking. I didn't win the $500. I didn't win the trip that they had planned for people that quit smoking. But what I did win was $20 and my lungs back. So 30 years later, I haven't smoked a cigarette. So we need incentives sometime.
And you're absolutely right. I love it. I love it. Thank you. Thank you very much. Heather, are there any other questions out there?
No, but if you have a question, feel free to raise your hand or put it in the chat. We're taking all questions. Don't hesitate. Don't be shy.
Thank you. And Wanda, I see you've been active in the chat. Thank you. I love inviting folks to our living room. Wanda said we need to have some more of these living room chats. She sent me a personal direct message. We'll consider it. Ladies, I want to ask you, I love it. Folks, this I didn't even realize, and I don't even think I even knew that all the ladies had some level of recovery or some level of abstaining from drug and alcohol when I invited you. I don't even know if I said, I think I'm like 33 years substance free. And let me tell y'all a secret. Bert, I told them yesterday, Bert called me out because I thought I was in full recovery. Bert was like, you ain't. That was, I remember in 1990 when I met Bert, she was like, she was so educational to me when I went into Baltimore. So I always tell folks, I've got like 33 years in full abstaining from substance issues. But again, I like Earlene, I think I probably could manage if I was to take a drink, but I don't know what management is, so I choose not to, right? I choose to be safe and I make better decisions, in this space. But I want to open it up for a second. I want to ask you to think about, I always think about that woman, because most of us are women who we look to, how do we talk to another woman? So it's Women's History Month, and I know all of you have women connected to you, so that new daughter, that new woman that's out there, and she's trying to figure out this HIV space. I met a woman about 3 weeks ago that was newly diagnosed, and she answered a question that I did on a podcast earlier this year. I don't know if women who get diagnosed today think the way we thought 30 years ago. She told me we do. She's worried about living. She's worried about survivorship. So in Women's History Month, I'm going to ask you all to take your closing remark and speak to a woman who's diagnosed and she's worrying about whether or not she might survive. In a minute each, if you can tell me, what might you tell her? I'll start it off. I would tell you, sister, get connected with other sisters, connect with a healthcare provider who's listening to you and who knows the information. And survivorship, thriving, wellness is available to you. I'm going to bounce it off right back to Kat, Bert, Arlene, and Yolanda.
Thank you. I would say, first of all, at least in my experience, the virus itself is like the least of my worries, right? You get on a regimen that's right for you, the best that's available. And as long as you take it, the virus is fine. It's all the other aspects of life, and as they say in recovery, life on life's terms, right? We're all still living life. And sadly, we also still exist under, multiple stigmas, right? And I'm just relating to Arlene, like being a Black woman and a trans woman, right? And so we all have layers of sort of stigmas, some more than others. And that's like our biggest problem, I think, that we deal with, day in and day out is, again, not necessarily the medical aspect of controlling the virus, but, keeping up your well-being, your mental health, and, and dealing with, things that come at you because of your diagnosis and people and their reactions to you. So none of that is easy, but it's doable. And I would also echo, get connected with other people. And just like people are, joining on this today, it makes me feel great because I've been kind of disconnected for a minute. So I'm back connected. And it's been wonderful to participate.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Bert, what would you say to her?
I would say, I always share with my personal experience. When I would say, when I found out I was HIV positive, I thought I was going to die too. What I had to do, I had to first accept that I was HIV positive. I had to get into a support group around people that was living with HIV and starting to deal with it too. I had to get a doctor. I had to learn how to go to hospital instead of keep waking up in the hospital from overdoses and stuff. And I had to just if I only could just get one person that believed in me and that trusted me, that I could tell everything and talk to about as honest as I could be at that time, I would get all the needs that I had. I had to go to NA meetings, and I had to go to HIV support meetings. I had to make appointments to the hospital instead of just winding up in the emergency room, and I would also say that I had to learn how to forgive me. I had to forgive me, and it wasn't important where I got it from, who I got it from. Just accept that I have it, and I have to do the things to take care and nourish it.
Wow, that was a bomb. I had to learn to forgive me. I'm in that line. Wow. Come on, Earlene, tell us, what would you say to her?
Well, I would say to her to just, on a daily basis here, at HIPS, where I work at, and, I've been case manager for 30 years. I'm old fashioned. But I would say to her, look to that one person that has compassion, has understanding, and just willing to work with her. And me personally, I believe that I'm so open about being HIV because God has assigned me the task of being one of the mentors, just one. There's so many of us, but to mentor and to talk about HIV and to tell people and let them know that, this is not 30 years back, it's 30 years forward. And again, life is what you make it.
Yes.
Living with HIV today, it is no longer a death sentence. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord.
Wow. Thank you. Ladies, you have been absolutely fabulous. I am being blown away over here. All of you know, I had such a good job in picking out this webinar. Okay, it was like, Linda, you do it. And I got to just invite my friends to come and have lunch with me and spend time together, talking our truths. It wasn't polished. Thank you for being honest, for being bold, but I thank you even more than anything for being willing to be selfless in sharing who you are, not just to this group. All of you I know do this daily. You're sharing with other women. You've spent your lifetime under this diagnosis, been an umbrella for other women living with HIV. So I want to thank you very much. I'm going to thank our funders again, Gilead, for allowing us to have this space. I want to invite everybody to remember a couple of things. Next month in April, I know they've already dropped it into the chat. We're having a monthly session. And our monthly session next month is talking about policy. Ribbon has a national community action board, and the policy action group will be hosting a session on long-term care, the Bill of Rights. As we're aging, there's a whole nother aging population not living with HIV. Part of our job at the organizing center is to make sure you know and understand what's happening. Please be here with us. Terry Wilder from SAGE will be our guest speaker. She's going to be talking about From the Bill, coming right out of AIDS Watch. Some of you, I know we'll see you in DC this weekend for AIDS Watch. If you're not going to be in DC this weekend, please on Tuesday, the 21st, call your local legislator and just tell them AIDS Watch is happening in DC. That's they know that we're still advocating. Amanda talking about research. We're going to be there talking about the needs of people living with HIV. Research and advocacy and education is part of that. The other thing, please, everyone, go click the link to the evaluation. If you would please do your evaluation for the day. Again, that allows us to tell another story, that this session was meaningful for you, it was useful for you, and hopefully we do hope that you walked away with some jewels. Again, ladies, thank you. I want to ask the audience just to come off mute for a second, unspotlight us, Heather, and let's just give the ladies some love, do some reactions. It's Women's History Month. I want to see all the wonderful out there. Again, thank all of you.
Thank you.
And we hope to see you. And thank you. Yes, they're all the beautiful faces, guys. We see you too. Thank you for joining us, Jeff Taylor. We see you. Leonardo. We see everybody. Thank you, Paula. We really appreciate everybody stopping in, spending some time with the Ribbon Organizing Center. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
What's that, darling?
For the new person, if there's just one new person on here, always remember, just think of HIV for today, not tomorrow.
Yes.
And you'll be okay.
Yeah.
I love you, Bert. It's only for today. Tomorrow we'll take care of tomorrow. I love it. Again, everyone, thank you. We'll see you next month. We're looking for you. Terry is getting ready for you, and you need to know there are other opportunities in the aging world, and we're here to bring it to you. So thank you very much. If my
Thank
guest
you.
can stay on with me just for 1 minute.